work on doing a citywide vulnerability assessment in what I call Climate Ready Boston Phase 1, which was a lot of technical analysis to figure out who, what, and where are vulnerable from the climate risks as we go forward. So from your perspective as somebody who sort of oversees the city's assets, its infrastructure around the harbor, what did you draw from that in terms of what some of the biggest challenges might be?
Well, I think the biggest challenge really is how do we take that plan and move it into action? And that's what this first step in developing the resilient design standards for public works is. And the challenge that we ran into in that development was that Public Works actually does not own a whole lot of coastal property. In fact, we might not actually.
Okay. There's something I'd like to point out here. This is all about protecting very, very rich people. I doubt that the Boston Harbor is owned by the city of Boston, and if it is, I doubt that the city of Boston or the people in it benefit from the wealth that is generated by the Boston Harbor. The first thing you'll notice if you look at this group of people who are using our taxpayer money to broadcast about this and generate sympathy for what they're portraying as Boston Harbor. Okay, but what it really is welfare for the rich. So not only do they get to have free media through public television, but they're able to do their promoting of generating an enormous amount of money, taxpayer money, in order to save the harbor. Well, I say, fuck these people. Just like if Manhattan goes underwater, fuck these people. Where were they when a hurricane came through? Was it Hurricane Sandy? Was that what it was called? And all the people who didn't get any money to help them rebuild their houses. Oh, they talked about how all this money was going to go to the people whose houses were damaged. But then it never does. It never does. And, the poorer you are, the less you get out of all this. But boy, we're going to do like Holland and protect our rich people. We're going to protect that harbor and all the trillions or billions of dollars that's in there. And it is just a very white thing. Are there no black people in Boston? Is everybody Irish there or something? That's what you'd think, right? I mean, maybe I can have a look and see what the population of Boston is. And it doesn't really matter, right? Because this is about rich and poor. And so often rich and poor is about black and white and Hispanic and people of color. So let me have a look at if I can find the demographics on Boston. But I'm willing to bet that there's plenty of poor black people. I mean, I know there's plenty of poor white people. And I don't think in any way will something like this benefit the poor. It's all about the rich. Demographics. race, ethnicity. So it's got 25% black, but you wouldn't know it to look at this panel. There's not one black person. And this is, I'm not talking about Boston, okay? I'm talking about everywhere that white people, just because they're a majority of the population, they've gotten this control, and it doesn't even matter if the, majority becomes a minority or whatever. They just maintain control through the economic system, through the capitalist system. And so, they're going to spend, can you imagine? They're going to protect the harbor from sea level rise, which means a massive amount of money. I'm sure anybody with half a brain agrees with me, okay? All the capitalists and the conservatives, they're going to go, oh, no, you don't, this benefits the whole city, and they're talking about trickle down. They're talking about status quo. I say, let the harbor die, and then give poor people that enormous amount of money you were going to spend to try to keep the harbor above water, and give it to them to build and run and own as a city, the new harbor. Same with Manhattan, when it goes underwater, just let it go like in Artificial Intelligence, the movie, where it's 30 stories underwater or something. Just let it go underwater and fuck it. Build a new Manhattan, somewhere inland where this is all just huge profit-making power centers for white people. Let's if it's gonna die, let's just, instead of investing 100 times what it costs to build a new place, and have it for the people. This is an easy way for us to decentralize the power and the money in this country. As we have catastrophes and rich people are wiped out, their assets are wiped out, the new ones should become public ones that benefit everybody in the city, not just the few. They're talking about saving stuff that's for the 1%. You gotta know that. But I'll let you listen to a little more.
Any coastal property. And so how do we protect the city's assets and the city right-of-way and the mobility that's required through that right-of-way when we don't actually have control over the property that needs to be built on? So that was the challenge that we were trying to tackle with the resilient design standards, was how do we get property owners on the coast to protect the property that's behind them for the public benefit.
So what does that mean?
See, public benefit, but property. It's not publicly owned. They're talking about, their people. They're talking about, how many poor people own beach houses? How many poor people, and if, I guarantee you that if there are any poor people living on the beach or within a mile of where, I don't know how much of the stuff is going to go underwater, that they're not getting any help. They may incidentally get some help, if we spend $1 trillion to build a wall, you can just find out how much it costs in Holland, okay? It's a huge amount, and imagine what's going to happen in Holland, huh? how much sea level rise are they prepared to deal with? They already obviously dealt with some at some point. How much are, I mean, can you imagine if you're holding back the ocean and it goes over the top? Oh my God. Everything inside is going to flood. Everything you were protecting. So you would have to spend how much? I mean, it costs a fortune. Isn't it cheaper to just back off? I mean, unless you're that afraid of losing land, right? Isn't it easier and cheaper to move? Well, not for the people who own that property. I mean, their property's going to go from, and you know they're going to have all kinds of ways that they screw around with insurance and all this kind of stuff. Eventually, if they're allowed to get away with it, which they are on a regular basis, they're always going to recoup their money, and probably at the taxpayer expense. No doubt, this insurance that's around is probably done through the government and subsidized through the government. The rich people, you know, they they complain incessantly about how poor people are sapping the system. The poor people that do 90% of the work because they're 90% of the population. Actually, they're the poor are about 60 or 70% of the population, and they do about 99% of the work. But they complain incessantly, the rich do, about the poor people being some kind of burden upon, them, basically. And the reality is just completely the opposite. The rich take the taxpayer money, which, half of it is theirs, okay? The rich pay about half of the taxes, which is a lot for a small group of people, but they have it to pay. Have it in oodles more, right? So, so they, but they get all that back in ways like this, just like this here. They get it all back because they buy off the politicians, or they put the politicians in power, and then the politicians pay them back by funneling all that taxpayer, not just the 50% they pay, but tons more back into the wealthy people's pockets. This is free. This is free money. I had some asshole at the food stamp place because I'm poor, right? At about 55, I realized that I needed to take care of my health, so I decided to pretty much dedicate my life to what's left of it to trying to stay healthy. And it's a monumental task. I mean, here I am at 4:30 in the morning, and I'll be going jogging again soon. And I went jogging at about 3 because it's too hot to jog during the day. And I have to jog about 5 miles a day. That's just turns my health around, and exercise. And it's an all-day job. So I don't have time for a regular job, or I'll fall apart. And then I won't be able to work anyway, right? Anyway, at 55 years old, and I worked for 22 years here in Kentucky, and I worked all my life. And if you want to count going to school, isn't school just preparation for work? So I worked and worked and worked all my life up till about 53, 54, and then I went to Europe to try and marry some girl, and it didn't work out. And when I came back, I realized I was in this situation. So I'm stuck with nothing. So what I'm doing is I'm trying to use whatever assistance I can get and whatever money I can work out, and I'm still trying to work, but I can't just go out there and sand down bumpers and stuff anymore. That's just not. I mean, I'm going to try, and I'm trying to get. That's the whole point of trying to get into shape. Because if I can't go out there in the heat of the day and jog a couple miles, I'm never going to be able to go out there and work all day on cars like I used to. So that's just not an option. Trying to work on other options, I work all the time. I mean, it's amazing. Since I quit and I've tried to retire, I end up working all day, every day. And yeah, a lot of it is politics. I'm trying to be very involved in politics. But, politics is like basketball or something. Not everybody can get a gig, you know what I mean? Even though I love it. I mean, that's what I'm doing right now. I'm sitting here talking to you. This is part of my radio show. And I'm telling you this because I'm representative of millions upon millions of Americans. People are going into their mid-50s, 60s. They're not physically able to do. I mean, you don't know what it's like. Your arms start to shrivel up, your legs start to shrivel up. It's really bad. I mean, you'll experience it, and you'll see what I'm talking about. And you have to adjust. So I'm adjusting. And I don't have much time left to worry about it because when I'm 60, I'll get my $800 a month or something. And, we could talk about Social Security because if you're rich and you stopped working and you were paying in and you were making thousands of dollars a month, then you still get thousands of dollars a month on Social Security, even though you probably didn't even work that hard because you made lots of money. And the fact is, and I know this from experience, that the more money you make, the less you have to work. So it's, the whole system's topsy-turvy. So this is very relative because I'm talking about specific situations that are upside down, where the rich get the most Social Security. And I'm also talking about this harbor thing where the rich get all the subsidies. They get all the government money. I mean, we don't even understand that. We're not allowed to understand that. We're not even allowed to talk about it. I mean, they're not talking about that here. Look at her. She's got this big smile on her face. You know why? Because they're talking about money. They really are. Free money for them, and they all get jobs out of it, long-term, ongoing jobs. I'm sure she's very well paid for her doing whatever she's talking about right here.
Exactly.
That's a hard question.
Good.
What it means is that as projects come through for city approvals, whether that's through the BPDA, whether that's through the Public Improvement Commission, resiliency will now be taken into consideration, and that those projects will need to conform to these resilient design standards that Public Works is putting in place.
And I presume those standards included more things than just sea level rise? Or will include?
They will include. Right now, we're really focused on flooding and hardening our coast. So we've looked at 4 different sort of standard designs that we are looking favorably upon. They will be very site specific, so we're not telling people what to do, but we're giving some good options that the city looks favorably upon. Starting with berms and raised harbor walk, and really improving the public space at the same time as protecting properties. There are places where walls are very important, and
so they're talking about making private areas, private property, uh, not only building it up so that it's protected from sea level rise, but they're also talking about making it nicer and prettier. So they're talking about property value, right? They're talking about improving it. And they're talking about using public money to improve it. Well, if you asked all the people who live in, forgive me for using the Trump term, but shithole parts of town, and that's not any reflection on them, it's not their fault. Would they say, yeah, we want you to spend $1 trillion to like make all the rich people's areas nicer and their property value more, instead of investing like where we live, where it won't, maybe, I'm sure most of it, although some of it probably will be flooding, but instead of investing, yeah, you know what I'm talking about. I mean, we're talking about just subsidizing the rich while you just thumb your nose at the poor. And this is just a generalization that is absolutely true, right? I mean, there's no arguing this. I mean, there is, if you're stupid, if you're conservative and a capitalist, and you don't want to admit this, but there's no there's no arguing it. I mean, it's just right out there in the open. Well, I take that back. That's the opposite of that. That is true. It's right out there in the open if you want to go digging for it. I mean, it's not like they're going to make it secret and hide it, because they know they don't have to. So it is out there. You can find out how the rich are subsidizing themselves, and at the expense of the poor, right? But it's not like they're going to put it on WGBH forum. You know, okay, maybe once in a while they'll put a show out to talk about the poor or something, and maybe in a blue moon they'll actually put something out. Unless, you know, poor people or people who care about the poor actually get some clout and some power and some resources, you know, TV stations and stuff, to actually make it public. I mean, it would be great if it was on, you know, once a month for 50 months, so everybody saw it, and because that's what they do with what they want you to see. They put it on. They know exactly what they're doing, and we'll get into the media and some of my other stuff, because that was one of my, along with like Kennedy assassination and all that crazy kind of stuff. It's not crazy, by the way. I'm just saying it's crazy what the rich people have done. But the media, and for sure, you know, they use their media just like they're using it right here. I mean, this was a show on the public broadcasting in Boston, and they're using public money, and they're able to, you know, make their point without admitting the stuff I was talking about, you know, subsidizing the rich over the poor. They're able to make their point over and over again. This is probably repeated constantly on PBS there in Boston. But where is my point made over and over again? Where is my point about how they're promoting spending millions of dollars, and they're acting like it's not going to promote, you know, property values for the rich and promote the rich and wealth for the rich, while ignoring the fact that they're ignoring the poor.